would first like to state that this is not an attempt to argue the efficacy of ivermectin in treating COVID-19 or to attack or slander reporters on a certain news network. This is an attempt to simply observe what appears to be a poor effort at best to apply objectivity, transparency, and honesty towards one's audience as a reporter for a news network. This is also an attempt to understand the reasoning behind what can only be perceived as a breach of ethics in reporting a news story. Was it purely incompetence, or an inability to rid oneself of bias and partiality in a broadcast during a very tumultuous and sensitive time in our nation? We will explore these questions moving forward. On September 1st, 2021, Joe Rogan released a statement on Instagram that he had tested positive for COVID-19 and had thrown the, quote, kitchen sink at it, which included monoclonal antibodies, Z-Pak, prednisone, and ivermectin. Upon learning about Joe Rogan's statement, CNN reporter Erin Burnett reported on the post by saying, Joe Rogan just announced that he's tested positive for coronavirus. Rogan telling his 13 million Instagram followers that he was treated with several drugs and he included ivermectin on the list, a drug used for livestock. Underneath on the lower third of the broadcast, you can see on the banner, taking livestock drug despite warning.
One of the world's highest paid and most influential podcast hosts, Joe Rogan, just announcing that he's tested positive for coronavirus. Rogan telling his 13 million Instagram followers that he was treated with several drugs, and he included ivermectin on the list, a drug used for livestock that the FDA and the CDC warn against using to treat COVID.
Turns out I got COVID. So we immediately threw the kitchen sink at it. All kinds of meds, monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, Z-Pak, prednisone, everything.
In another video on CNN, journalist Anderson Cooper also reports on the breaking news with headline, Joe Rogan announces he has COVID, praises horse dewormer ivermectin.
More breaking news this evening. Joe Rogan, an extremely popular podcaster, announced on social media today that he has COVID. Rogan has said young, healthy people don't need to get vaccinated. In his statement on social media, Rogan said he has taken several therapeutics to recover.
The potential issue with this style of reporting and interesting representation of the drug ivermectin is that ivermectin is not just a horse dewormer used for livestock, but also a drug used by over 250 million people annually. And in the interest of objectivity, journalistic integrity, and clarity, there are many drugs used by veterinarians on animals that are also used by humans as well, including antibiotics, antidepressants, and pain medications such as amoxicillin, Prozac, and Tramadol, to name a few. In the report with Burnett, she is accompanied by Dr. Gregory Yu, the medical expert who will address the possible danger of the drug, almost intentionally implying that the drug is innately poisonous or toxic for humans to take. Nowhere in his statement is there any mention of any unique serious danger regarding ivermectin other than the dose is prescribed for animals, specifically horses, and that it has not yet been approved for use against COVID-19 according to systematic studies.
Dr. Yu, obviously you're familiar with this. Most of us were not until recent days when we started to hear about this. And I understand you field daily requests from patients to be prescribed ivermectin. Rogan touting it to 13 million people, saying he was positive for COVID and trying all these drugs, including ivermectin. How dangerous is this drug, and how dangerous is it for somebody who's so influential to be pushing it?
Yes, Erin. First of all, thank you for having me. I am very concerned about this. The data specifically for ivermectin in the use of COVID-19 is very poor with low quality data. Ivermectin is an antiparasitic for infections such as worms and scabies, but it was usually not used for viral infections. The best evidence out there, which is a systematic review of 14 studies, did not support the use of ivermectin for COVID-19. So it's unclear if this is effective or safe for the use of COVID-19. The NIH does not have a recommendation for or against the use of this. And the Infectious Diseases of America, Society of America, they have a statement out there recommending against the use for COVID-19 unless if this is for clinical trials.
In the report with Cooper, he is also accompanied by Dr. Lena Wen. CNN medical analyst and former Baltimore health commissioner, and CNN chief media correspondent Brian Stelter, who states that when you have a horse deworming medication that's discouraged by the government that actually causes some people in this crazed environment we're in to actually want to try it, that's the upside down world we're in with figures like Joe Rogan.
One of those drugs he mentioned, ivermectin, is something more often used to deworm horses. CDC says there's no evidence it works on COVID. Its increased usage has only led to a substantial increase in overdoses after a push by some on the far right, citing vaccine misinformation. Perspective now from our chief media correspondent and anchor of CNN's Reliable Sources, Brian Stelter, and Dr. Leana Wen, CNN medical analyst and former Baltimore health commissioner. Brian, this is obviously someone who has said on his podcast that healthy young people probably don't need to get vaccinations. What's he saying about his condition?
Yeah, and he is one of the most influential figures in all of media, especially among young men. He has a podcasting deal with Spotify worth $100 million, but in the past he has downplayed the vaccine. And in this case, he seems to have admitted he has COVID because it's hurting him in the pocketbook. He had to postpone or reschedule one of his upcoming stage shows. So you'd think the economic consequences might get people's attention and make people think, make his fans think differently about the threat of COVID. But he is trying to portray this as if he is feeling better now, he's doing better now because of this cocktail of drugs and medications that he has taken. Of course, some of these are under emergency use authorizations. Others have been, discouraged by the CDC and the FDA. But when you have a horse deworming medication that's discouraged by the government, that actually causes some people in this crazed environment we're in to actually want to try it. That's the upside down world we're in with figures like Joe Rogan.
Only once between these two reports, at the very end, is there any mention of the fact that ivermectin is a drug that is used by humans, never mind over 250 million people annually in the world. Moreover, a drug that was at the center of a Nobel Peace Prize awarded to William Campbell and Satoshi Omura in 2015 for its discovery and implementation. A drug that is also on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, and it was also approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration as an antiparasitic agent. Ivermectin is also available as a generic medicine, and the side effects mentioned include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, severe skin rash, extremely low blood pressure, permanent liver damage, and death in large doses. Very similar to an over-the-counter medicine known as acetaminophen, which also includes irritability, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, jaundice, seizures, coma, liver damage, and death in large doses. So the question remains, is this a gross misrepresentation of a drug to merely slander a public figure? If so, why? And what ethical issues can be identified through their negligent coverage of an American citizen's legally prescribed use of a medicine by a medical professional? I believe these actors took this specific course of action due to a utilitarian approach to ethics, where the ends justifies the means. At this point in time during the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty, and the quickest way toward a comfortable future at that time was to vaccinate every individual possible, therefore reducing the risk of the spread of COVID-19. Rogan's rhetoric risked this desired outcome, and therefore, in the actor's eyes, risked the health of society in general. So, refusing to clearly identify the truth behind ivermectin and its application and efficacy in treatment of humans for decades, and highlighting the drug's initial use towards livestock, this achieved the desired outcome no matter the ethicality of the means taken. They had identified the path of action, attempted to see the consequences of those actions for everyone, evaluated them, and decided which produced the greatest utility, leading to the pursuit of this action. The morality of the actions was determined by the outcome. The responsibilities, however, or loyalties of journalists is first to the public. One could justify these actions by saying that through furthering the likelihood of mass vaccination, they are putting that loyalty first. But the main goals and standards of journalistic integrity toward the public that they are loyal to is accuracy and factual reporting to said public. I do not believe that there are many who would think that this representation of the drug and Rogan's application of it would reflect that responsibility. As a matter of fact, award-winning chief medical correspondent Sanjay Gupta speaks to that fact.
Dude,
what did they say?
They lied
What
and
did they
said
say?
I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor
Yeah.
along
They
with
shouldn't have said
a
it was
bunch of other
if it was-
medications.
if you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication for parasitic disease, and as you say, it's probably, I think, 250 million people have taken it around the world.
I would like to think that the individuals I respect and admire would recognize that you cannot sacrifice your integrity for what you believe to be a justifiable removal of one's duties to full transparency, especially in journalism, when at a time, respect and trust towards journalism was quickly and consistently dwindling for a multitude of reasons. Do not empower the disloyalty toward journalism, and definitely don't fuel the fire of distrust. Provide the full picture of what it is you're covering, and trust that the depth, clarity, and integrity of one's work will provide the desired outcome of informing one's audience of the facts. Trust that they will do the right thing when the time comes. I believe that CNN did the wrong thing by misleading and misinforming its audience through omission and perversion of the facts. It is not the job of a journalist to slant a story in a way that misleads and misinforms those who depend on it, regardless if you believe that it is the best course of action toward a safer and more prosperous end. By doing so, you rob all those who rely on you of their autonomy and agency. Report without fear or favor. You must avoid situations that could influence or compromise one's work. I would have taken a deontological approach to my report, where good processes lead to good results, by providing the full story regarding ivermectin, its applications towards humans, its pedigree, and why it is not fit for this specific virus. Through this approach, you focus on upholding one's duty, which in this case is honesty towards the public. You cannot try to gain control over the consequences of one's actions, only over whether or not they are in line with one's duties. Through this approach, you also treat all with equal dignity, including the seemingly reprehensible Joe Rogan.
So for you, Joe Rogan,
Yes.
I would say you've had it,
Yes.
so now get one shot of the vaccine.
No.
Why not?
Because I have better immunity than I would if I was vaccinated.
Right?
Yes. Don't I?
I think your immunity is really good.
So why, if I've already gotten through COVID and I was really only sick for a day, and then 5 days later I was negative, and I do have the natural antibodies now, why would I take a chance in getting vaccinated on top of that?
By the way, I'm glad you're better. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
it only lasted a day.
You're probably
I really
the only
am.
one at CNN that's glad.
No.
Although some of the issues that arise through this approach include a level of inflexibility, its impersonal nature, and possible conflicting duties. However, to this criticism I would say that this approach appears to be far more in line with journalism than the, to all appearances, utilitarian approach taken by CNN. It is supposed to be the objective and trustworthy product that you produce that is the focus, not whether or not it provides the desired outcome perceived by those producing it. For future journalists in times of uncertainty and fear, apply this in the future. They will avoid a multitude of issues moving forward, one of which is also a blatant adherence to loyalty. A loyalty to certain ways of thinking that leads to a conflict of interest, which also leads to a negation of your findings or facts. You should either withdraw or be transparent about your loyalty. And we know that even not acting or stating is an act of loyalty. Loyalty to a cause rather than the people can be an incompletely conceived, bias or prejudice thinly cloaked. Everyone has multiple loyalties. It's knowing when to shift from one to another that avoids failure to adhere to the proper loyalties. This will also help avoid the worst outcome of all, the disgust and distrust in the media, as opposed to admiration and assurance in what they produce.